In the north of Russia, in the distant Yamal village of Karp, there are places where serial killers and terrorists peacefully coexist, and this colony is one of the most terrifying in Russia. It houses the most dangerous criminals, sentenced to life imprisonment. What kind of prison is this, from which there has not been a single successful escape attempt? Who and for what reasons are they imprisoned there? And most importantly, under what conditions and why are the most bloodthirsty killers and rapists brought in the Polar Owl? As you may have understood, the Polar Owl is a correctional colony, but the official name is Colony Number 18. People convicted of crimes of various degrees of severity are brought there, but primarily it's known for housing maniacs, terrorists, and leaders of criminal organizations who have been sentenced to life imprisonment. Let me briefly tell you about the emergence of this prison. It's located in the village of Karp, in the Yamal-Nenets Autonomous Okrug. The village was founded in 1961 due to the construction of the famous Transpolar Railway. According to Stalin's plan, the railway, stretching for 1,500 kilometers, was supposed to connect eastern and western Siberia. The most active work was carried out in the period after the World War II, that is, in the late 1940s and early 1950s. There is a version that after World War II, the start of World War III was not excluded, so the implementation of this project could have had a strategic character. The construction was carried out primarily by convicted individuals, prisoners of the Gulag. However, the project of the Transpolar Railway remained just a project, because construction was suspended after Stalin's death. During the work along the railway lines, many stations appeared. One of them, as a result, became a close-type settlement, which was named Karp, meaning Northern Lights, in 1961. Initially, an industrial colony was established there, where criminals worked in a reinforced concrete plant. However, the Soviet government had a task to create a colony for the most dangerous Soviet repeat offenders, and the village of Karp suited them, especially since it's located in the Arctic. In 1981, the first batch of the most dangerous experienced criminals was delivered to the colony. In 2004, it was granted the status of a colony for life-term convicts. Many may wonder, if the zone is located in the Arctic, delivering food, clothing and other supplies, they could be extremely difficult and expensive. In fact, one of the most mysterious prisons is completely autonomous. It has its own poultry farm, pig farm, shoemaking workshop, sewing production, and even factory where souvenirs are made. The colony also has a lathe workshop, a church, and, hard to believe, a club. However, prisoners are not allowed there, as their Polar Council consists of more than 300 members. It may really surprise lifers, as they are called, that they are prohibited from talking. In other words, if two people live together, and this is the maximum allowable, they can only communicate in whispers, and it's forbidden to speak during walks. For conversations, inmates are immediately sent to isolation. The walks themselves are also very conditional. Lifers work for an hour and a half every day, but the place itself is a small area fenced with bars, but with an open sky. The weather does not favor comfortable living either, as summer there lasts only 1 month, July. In winter the temperature drops to minus 40 degrees Celsius. It's said that some of the facilities in the area are in a state of emergency. But let's return to the inmates. Before settling two life-term convicts together, a psychologist works with them to ensure that they can communicate normally with each other. However, to prevent conflicts from arising in the future, the convicts are still rotated among themselves, as these individuals are quite unpredictable, and even under such control, lethal outcomes have occurred. In 2016, neo-Nazi Alexei Voivodin, serving a life sentence, beat his cellmate to death during a fight, who was sentenced to the same term. Incidents of this nature highlight the difficulty of maintaining order in such conditions. There were also many scandalous incidents when prison staff exceeded their authority and beat or abused the criminals. Employees used various methods to extract confessions from the inmates. This prison, with a high concentration of dangerous criminals, includes some of the most notorious maniacs and murderers. Here are some of them. Alexander Pichushkin, known as a Pizza Park maniac. Denis Yusyukov, a former police major. Sergei Butorin, the leader of the Orekhovo criminal community, as well as the only surviving terrorist from Beslan. This list is only part of the numerous convicts sent to the Polar Owl prison to serve life sentences. According to various sources, there were between 32 to 190 false confessions extracted. Later, it was announced that the case was stalled because it could involve high-ranking officials. In 2011, the scheme was as follows. An employee of the prison assigned a specific cellmate to the inmates, who physically abused them, coercing confessions out of them. As soon as the life-term convicts took the blame for the crimes, the abuse stopped. As extending the life sentence was no longer possible, the cases were closed. Then confessions became such a common practice that one inmate took responsibility for the murder of famous Russian journalist Politkovskaya. Then authorities began conducting investigative experiments. They noticed many inconsistencies in the defendant's testimonies, and they in turn refused to cooperate with the investigation. Eventually, they uncovered a prison employee behind these confessions. Now he has been found guilty and sentenced to 3.5 years of imprisonment. After serving his sentence, he could not return to prison. To give you an idea of the high concentration of dangerous criminals in the Polar Owl, here are some of those who received life sentences and went there. Alexander Pishushkin, famous in Russia as a killer, or as people called him, the Bitsa Park maniac, who predominantly committed murders in Bitsa Park in Moscow. He offered people to drink, allegedly to commemorate his deceased pet, then struck them on the head and dumped them in the sewer. He is responsible for 49 murders, although he admits to 60, and not once did he show remorse for his actions. Moreover, he later said that if he had not been caught, he would have continued killing. In court, he delivered his famous speech, in which he uttered several striking phrases. "I will return to Bitsa Park. My country remembers the Hammer well. All this time I did what I wanted. For 500 days I have been under arrest, and a huge number of people determined my fate. Policemen, investigators, judges, prosecutors, jurors, experts. Hundreds of people decide the fate of one person, while I alone decided the fate of 63 people. Although 3 can be discounted. I was the prosecutor, the juror, the judge, and the executioner for them. I fulfilled all your functions. I was almost like a god. Feel the difference." Also Dmitry Voronenko, a Ukrainian serial killer, who in the mid-2000s killed 4 girls in St. Petersburg and received a life sentence in the Polar Owl. Denis Yevsukov, a former police major, who in 2009, in a state of alcohol intoxication, killed 2 people and injured 7 others in a Moscow supermarket. Sergei Butorin, a gun leader, was sentenced to life imprisonment for organizing 38 murders. Also, there is the only surviving terrorist from Beslan. For those who haven't seen it yet, I already covered the most terrible terrorist act in the history of Russia on the channel, when terrorists seized a school with over 1,000 hostages, and instead of negotiations, the Russian leadership began bombing the school with grenade launchers. The inmates are awakened at 6 a.m., lights out at 10 in the evening. Inmates can listen to the radio at certain times and watch horror movies once a week. Also, they can take a 10-minute shower for 1 week. An interesting fact, only one person has ever managed to leave the Polar Owl for life. Anvar Masalimov was sentenced to death in 1991 for killing his friend. He was executed for the first time in prison in 1976, when he was only 22 years old. He stayed free for a short time, about 6 months, and went back to prison in August 1991. While he was awaiting execution, the country imposed a moratorium on the death penalty. So to speak, it was temporarily abolished, and the death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. But in 2016, he was released due to the adoption of a law improving the situation of convicts. This is the first time in the history of Russia when a death row convict was released. No one has ever managed to escape from the Polar Owl. Only once did the prisoner manage to get out of the exercise yard, but he was immediately caught and returned. Some, when they find out that they are about to go to colony number 18, tries to end their lives earlier. Some purposefully refuse to treat their own HIV, thereby hastening the end. The romantic name, Correctional Colony number 18, was almost accidentally given, because of the owl figure in the zone's yard. Symbolically, also because in the mythology of the northern peoples, the owl is the guide to the afterlife. and every time they look at the polar owl in the prison yard, the convicts remember that they are here forever.